familiar, you pick up a textbook on political theory or sociological theory or anthropological theory, the canon is Western, right? Now the assumption is, the assumption behind this is very interesting and telling, which should lead us actually to intellectually revolt. Right? The assumption is, let's say we take sociology or anthropology. These fields developed in the 19th century. So the canon is usually defined in terms of the 19th century thinkers: Marx, Weber, Durkheim, Alexis de Tocqueville, Georg Zimmer. Sometimes Freud is also included, and you have Kruger, Boas, and others in anthropology. Now, these were thinkers who were said to have thought systematically about society and theorized about society and advanced certain concepts about society in the 19th century, in a period when the West had become conscious of itself as being modern and different from an earlier period. Now the assumption is that nobody outside the West during the same period thought systematically about society. That's the assumption. And the assumption also is that no women women even in Europe thought systematically about society. That's why in almost every work on the history of social thought, or the history of anthropological thought, there are no references to non-white people and there are no references to women. As if there weren't any non-white people and as if there weren't any women who were thinking systematically about society. But this is of course not true. An example which I will speak about more in my time later is Jose Rizal. Rizal was speaking in the 19th century, the late 19th century. You could say that he was the first systematic thinker of society, the first systematic thinker of colonial society, definitely, I would say, in Southeast Asia, but possibly in Asia as well. The first systematic thinker from a decolonial perspective rather than a colonial perspective, because he was very conscious about the problem of thinking in terms of colonial categories. So, you have the subject-object dichotomy and you have marginalization of the non-European or non-European ideas. Now the third feature of Eurocentrism, which continues in the social sciences today, which is a result of the marginalization of non-Western ideas, what you have instead is the application of Western concepts, which are not always problematic, but sometimes they are problematic. There is a distortion. Okay? And I'd like to again give the example of religion. And this example applies to several religions, but I'm more familiar with the example of Hinduism. It's really a vivid example, case of distortion, in the sense that what we understand to be a single religion called Hinduism was a colonial construction, was a European construction, which eventually became internalized by the Indians themselves. But it's an example of Eurocentric distortion. If you were to go to India 500 years ago, you will not find a religion called Hinduism. And it's not that the term Hinduism replaced another term. There wasn't a unitary religion called Hinduism or called any other name. Right? What there were several religious traditions with, worship of overlapping worship of deities, common deities, but they were different religious traditions. But what happened is that the Europeans, they looked, when they went to India, they saw religions that they recognized. They saw Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Right? The rest, they did not recognize, and they began to study. They imposed a Christian understanding. They looked at the religions of India, those who are not Jews, Christians, or Muslims. They looked at them through the lens of Christianity, through the lens of their own experience in Europe with Christianity. So in Christianity, you have various sects and and denominations, all under the umbrella of Christianity. Right? They assumed that was the case with these religions that they saw in India. But there was no name for that religion, so they gave the name. Now, the name Hinduism, of course, comes from the Arabic word al-Hind. The Arabs, the Muslims in general, the Persians, the Arabs referred to the Indian subcontinent as al-Hind, but it was a geographical term. It did not denote a religion. So, Indians were referred to as Hindi or Hindu. The term Hindustan also came into use. But in the minds of the Europeans, it also referred to religion, which they literally, if you pardon the expression, christened. Now, if the British did not rule India, this distortion would have simply remained as a mental distortion, as an intellectual distortion. But because the British ruled India, and therefore developed institutions and organizations based on this distortion, you have institutions, with the name Hindu in it. So gradually, because of the rule by the British, the Indians themselves internalized this idea of there being a single religion called Hinduism, and some of them, or many of them, refer to themselves as Hindus. Although there are Hindus, there are Indians who refuse to accept the label of Hinduism and see themselves in other terms. For example, there are Shaivites who worship the deity Shiva and say they're not Hindus, but they are worshippers of Shiva. And I think something similar could be said of the construction of Shintoism in Japan, although I'm not knowledgeable about that. But this is an example of distortion. When you look at the study of Islam today, there's been very little effort, the study of Muslim extremism, there's been very little effort to understand extremism in terms of the conceptual vocabulary of Muslims themselves. Even though Muslims from the earliest days of Islam had already started to conceptualize extremism in their midst. But in the modern study of Muslim extremism, what you have is the use, again, terms derived from Christianity or from European experience. The term Islamic fundamentalism, really, fundamentalism was first used to talk about Christian fundamentalism. Or the term Islamism, which dates back to probably the time of Voltaire, the French philosopher, is now used to refer to a form of Muslim extremism, and sometimes used synonymously with political Islam. Now, these terms are not necessarily problematic, but at the same time, you cannot, it seems to be an unsound method to ignore the way Muslims themselves conceptualize extremism when you study Muslim extremism. Now, so I've said very briefly what I mean by Eurocentrism. Before I say more about the consequences of Eurocentrism, I want to say something about the background, the historical background. Eurocentrism is a gradual outcome of the centuries-long process of what some scholars, in particular Boaventura de Sousa Santos and Ramon Rosfogel, refer to as epistemicide. epistemicide refers to the killing of knowledge, the murder of knowledge. Right? This is a process that began with the rise of the West, with the rise of Europe, the discovery of America, and the development of capitalism and the gradual spread of capitalism through imperialism, in particular through colonialism. And we find that there are, as discussed by Routledge, there are several historical events that exemplify this epistemicide. The discovery of America, for example, the so-called discovery of America. We should know that that terminology itself is problematic. The European discovery of America resulted in the extermination of the native people. The result of that extermination was not only the loss of lives, but also the loss of ways of knowledge, entire knowledge system. Right? With the establishment with the settlement of America by Europeans, that was followed by the transatlantic slave trade. Now the transatlantic slave trade not only uprooted Africans from their lands, but also uprooted them from their religion and their culture and their ways of knowing. So by the time they were settled in America, in North America, and also in the South, gradually over the generations, entire knowledge systems were also lost. And we can think of other examples. Now colonialism is also an historical case of epistemicide, particularly those colonies that were colonized for centuries. Entire knowledge systems were lost. Entire populations were uprooted from their knowledge systems, and even if those knowledge systems were known, let's say they were studied, well, they were actually studied during the colonial period, they became objects of study even by the colonized. So when a Malay studies his own knowledge system, he's studying that knowledge system as an outsider. He's not looking at the world through his own knowledge system, because he has been uprooted from that knowledge system. So that knowledge system is no longer available to him as a source of ideas and concept formation and theory building. So this is the historical background. It's not Eurocentrism is not something that developed in the last few decades. It's something that has been in the making since the 15th century, since the discovery of America, since the global rise and spread of capitalism, and along with capitalism, colonialism, epistemicide, and the marginalization, not the actual disappearance of knowledge systems. Now, it's very important to stress that Eurocentrism is not just our criticism of Eurocentrism is not just a lamentation of the loss of knowledge. That we have nostalgia for our lost cultures and we miss that. It's not just that. But there are consequences for the way we live in this world. There are very serious consequences. Now, one of the consequences is that the Eurocentricity of thought, because of the traits of Eurocentrism, that we are objects of study, that our knowledge systems are marginalized, that there's a distortion of our way of thinking about various issues. Because of these traits, we think in a way that brings us to ideological compliance with European views, with the way the world is organized, basically along capitalist, gendered, and racist lines. Right? So the theories of race, of economy, of development that we subscribe to, generally not exclusively, though there are radical theories out there, but generally these are theories which comply with the views of those who actually run and control our world political economy. This leads us to the next point, that Eurocentrism is not simply a attribute of our thought, but is also a characteristic of the world. It's not only our thinking and our discourse that is Eurocentric, the world itself is Eurocentric. So the way the world is organized, if you look at its political, economic dimensions, the world is centered around Euro-America, right? Since the 16th century, when a world capitalist economy began to develop and has since spread and enveloped the whole world, this system is centered around Euro-America. First of all Europe and then America. And it continues to be the case. So the Eurocentricity, we speak of the Eurocentricity not only of our discourse and thought, but also of the world itself. And the two go hand in hand. The two reinforce each other. The survival of a Euro-America-centric world depends on the extent to which people in the rest of the world comply with that system and believe in that order, right? And part of the problem is that because of the dominance of Eurocentrism, we cannot imagine that there are alternative possible systems. Socialism is largely discredited as an alternative, and capitalism